Hi, and welcome again to the series of tutorials on Oracle JavaScript Extension Toolkit. Uh, Today we're going to be reviewing how to include new components into our application and also how to grab components from the Oracle Jet Cookbook to integrate them into our application. So let's begin. So if you remember, in the previous episode we created the project and also modified the contents on the content component. What we're going to be doing right now is creating a new component and importing it into this component so it can be rendered in the application, like just as just like we render the hello jet message in the application. So if we go back to our code, what we need to do to create a new component is either add a new file, a new .tsx file under the components directory, or another directory inside the components directory with an index.tsx file, just as in the case of content/index.tsx. Uh, so we're gonna be using the approach of the folder with the index.tsx .tsx file, just to keep a better organization for our components, because most of the time your components will consist of the, more than just one index.tsx file. So let's add a new folder. Let's call it dashboard, and let's add a new file inside that dashboard dashboard folder, which will be an index.tsx file. In this index.tsx file, we will first need to import some utilities from Preact. In this case, I'm going to import H from Preact, which basically just gives us access to the developer tools for Preact in the browser. This is not really necessary, but it is helpful if you want to debug your app uh, in the browser. Next, well, Copilot is being really helpful here. The next thing we need to do is export a Preact component. So for that, we just need to write a function that returns some JSX and export it. So in the example here, I think it's right. Uh, let's just return a P or paragraph tag with the message that we already have. So just to recap, export a function that returns some JSX, which is basically just a Preact component. So once we have a file like this, we can import this component in our content.index.tsx file. So if we remove the hello jet message and import our dashboard component from dot/dashboard slash index, we should be able to use our component inside our content component. So if I go dashboard, uh, we should see the same message in our application, right? Hello Jet. But notice that when I go back to dashboard/index, if I change Jet for hello dashboard, the change will be reflected in our application. So the message is contained in its own component. So yeah, this is basically how you create new components in Oracle Jet, just the same as you do in Preact or React. And now comes the interesting part, which is importing components from the Oracle Jet Cookbook. In this case, we're going to be importing the select single component to select between various options. In this case, we're going to be selecting some sports categories. Uh, so to import a component from the Oracle Jet Cookbook, it's it's really simple. Depending on the component, this is a simple component, so it should be simple. The only thing we need to do is follow the recipe specified in the Oracle Jet Cookbook. In this case, it says that we need to create an OJC select single element, bind on value change event handler to the element, and optionally we can bind an OJ value action to the event handler for the element. So how we do this? Well, Oracle provides us also with examples for the HTML and demo.tss. If you notice, this is not using preact. This is actually using knockout. Unfortunately, the Oracle Cookbook does not have examples on preact or pdom components yet, but we can use this knockout component examples as reference to develop our own pdom components. So the first thing we need to do to import this component is create an OJC select single element. But before that, we need to import the necessary, let's just say, dependencies. We can find them in the demo.ts file, which in this case, the required dependencies would be the OJC select single element and also the array data provider. So we can copy these imports into our component. We don't need the knockout one. And with this, what we can do is use these elements inside our component. So to use the OJC select single element, we need to first import the OJC select single library or file. And you can see that it's already here in our application. We didn't need to do anything. We didn't need to add this drop down button. It already works. Just import it and add it, and it's here. It obviously has no data right now. That's what we're going to do next. Add some data with the data provider. So for that, we will go back to the cookbook and review the demo.html file to see which are the properties that this OJC select single element requires. So we can see here that it can take some properties such as ID for the element ID, a label hint, which I think it's this label that displays on the input just to hint whatever is need to be input in this select single element. The label edge, the on value changed event handler, on value action event handler, some classes for styling, the data which will define the contents of this OJC select single element, and the value which will define the pre-selected value, which in this case was Chrome. So if we notice these properties are assigned to binded variables in the code, like value change handler, browser data provider, and select val. These are defined in the demo.ts file. So if, for example, we want to know what is being assigned to the data property, we can go back to the demo.ts file and see what is the value of the browser's DP variable. And as we can see, the browser's DP variable is just an instance of an array data provider. So the way that Jet handles data for its components is by creating a data provider, which takes the raw data and some options. This way, the components have various methods that the array data provider API provides, so it can perform various operations such as fetching elements by offset, retrieving the contents of a specific element, and lots of stuff. Uh, so right now we're going to be creating a new data provider to populate our OJC select single element. So if we go back to the code, or well, first let's check how we build this array data provider. It takes the data, in this case these browsers, which is defined here. It's an array of objects which have a value property and a label property. And as you can see, the array data provider takes the values and an option subject. And one of the most important options in the data provider is the key attribute, which will basically identify each one of the options in the select single. So the first thing we will need to do is create our dataset. Let's just copy this for reference and paste it in our project. Let's create a const, and we have browsers, but we want the activities. And if you can see, well, the value and label property serve different purposes. The label property is the name that will be displayed in the OJC select single option. For example, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, Opera, Safari. This is what is displayed. But when you select an element, the value that will be returned in the code, or the value that you will be able to extract, is the one that you specify in the value property. So here in the cookbook example, we can see that if we select an element, we can, well, the component or the example renders the entire value included in the dataset. So it has the value FF, even says the previous value, and the from where this value was updated from. So since we want to include the sports, in our case, we're gonna be doing baseball. And in this case, we can use the same value as the label. They don't need to be different, but we need both properties in our dataset. We're gonna be also including bicycling. Uh, bicycling. Uh, let's also include skiing and soccer. So, and let's remove the last one. So with these activities, what we're going to do is define a new array data provider. Let's do that inside of our component. So it will say const data provider, new array data provider. We just pass the activities or the dataset and the key values, well, key attributes, which in this case is the value attribute. And then what we need to do is pass the data property to our component, and in this case it will be our data provider. So if we refresh or save this file, we can see that now our component doesn't have the options that we wanted to have. But okay, I noticed that was what was missing. Uh, you need to add another property to your OJC select single element, which is item text, in which you basically define which of the properties of your items will define the label, which in our case is label. So probably we could have used an object with just the value property, but to follow the consistency with the cookbook, we will do it like this. So if we add the item text property with the label value, you can see that now what gets rendered in this select single component is the label of our activities. Now we're going to add some event handlers to render the deselected element in our page. So for that we will need to first import two things. The first one would be to import the use state hook from preact. So whenever we make a change, we can tell the UI to re-render our UI and display that change. And also we will need to import the OJ select single type. So with this OJ select single type, we can create a handler function for whenever the value of the select single changes. And to do that, what we need to do is add another property called on value change, yeah, and pass it a function. So let's define our function here, const uh, value change, value change. And let me fix this typo. So this is gonna take an event which is gonna be an OJ select single dot on value change, or in this case it could also be an OJ value action. Let me see if there's value change. Yeah, value change. And here we're gonna be able to use the event parameter that gets passed to our function. We can also notice that here we're getting an error because this type requires two generic type parameters, which are the types of the value and the types of the key attributes. The key attribute that identifies each item in the data provider. So in this case, they're both strings because our value is a string, and our key attribute is this value as well. So we can go with string, string, and now we have access to the event object, and this event object contains details about the element that was selected. I think, for example, if we display the event detail value, we will do that by creating a new state called selected value or selected activity. In this case, this is useful. By default, let's say it would be baseball. We can even add it here as the value property to be the default selected value. But I think we would also like to render it inside our UI as well, probably just as plain text is fine. So if we put a p tag here and add the selected activity, the selected activity should be rendered below the OJ select symbol. But we also need to change the value of the selected activity every time we change the value in the OJ select element. So this is giving us type error because type of string null is not assignable to a parameter of type string. So if in the case it is null, we just display no activity selected. So if we go back to our application, we can see that we now display the selected element in the UI. So whenever we change this changes. I mean, this isn't really useful because we already have it here in the value, but imagine that instead of having just a string in the value attribute, we have something like an object or a function. We could perform operations uh, based on whatever the user selects and get access to the value stored in each single element of the OJ select component. Uh, so yeah, I think that's it for adding components from the cookbook. Well, let me just set the label hint just to label a hint. Activities, select activities. So yeah, this looks better. Now it even has a hint that tells you what you are selecting. But yeah, this is it for the uh, tutorial about adding new components into a Jet project and also grabbing components from the cookbook. So thank you for your attention.